Welcome to Sales Secrets and Biblical Truths that apply to everyone. Hey, friend, welcome. This is the Beau Leadership Group podcast where we believe that leadership isn't about power, it's about positive influence. We'd like to update your leadership education and bring a return on that work that you do on your leadership, and getting a return on work where you can get satisfaction and maybe even bigger pockets is what today's show's about. Sales is what we're talking about. Sales generate revenue and profits and make the capitalistic system work and get you key results. If you've ever convinced a kid to eat broccoli, talk to a friend about a bad haircut, or talk them out of the bad haircut, bad color, or raise money for a good cause, guess what? You're in sales. You're also in leadership. The best part, leadership investments pay dividends, whether you're investing in your personal growth, your professional career, or even your church life. The return on a leadership investment is real and it gets compounded just like money in the bank. Every time you invest in growing your leadership, it pays off across all areas of your life. Question: when was the last time you made an investment in your leadership? How did it pay off? And just like a return on money, your influence grows as you grow. Jim Rohn said, if you want to have more, you have to become more. That's how leadership works. You grow, your influence grows, and your impact on others grows. Whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave, just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. That's Matthew 20:26. So, idea in the short is service is good. This reminds us that true leadership is not about you, it's about serving others and not seeking glory. I was listening to a podcast from Don Yeager today. He talked about how the leader doesn't necessarily have to go for the glory. You can be leading things and not in the spotlight. Question 2, what would happen if you get 10% better at influencing people every month? Let's go to the heart of selling with Zig Ziglar, the master of charm and clarity. Once he said, if you help other people get what they want, you can get what you want. Sales is helping at scale. And when you help others, you're making an investment in their growth. You're sowing seeds for a return. And that's how great leaders, fundraisers, and parents operate. They invest in others. That's where they get the return on leadership investments when they show up. It's more blessed to give than receive, is what Acts 20:35 tells us. When you focus on giving value, the blessings, both tangible and intangible, come back to you. Question 3, who do you know that needs something you can offer today? Little story about a 12-year-old kid in Texas. He sold $10,000 worth of chocolate bars, not because of his pitch, but because of his passion. He believed in the after-school program that funded, and that's leadership. That's influence. That's a return on your investment in a better future. That's also a kid that knows about the follow-up secret. I call it the follow-up secret because everyone knows that you should follow up, but how much should you follow up? The National Sales Executive Association says 80% of sales are made after the 5th follow-up, but 44% of people give up, salespeople that is, after 1 follow-up. So you're probably not even anywhere close to following up more than you should. Studies have also shown that if you follow up by phone, by email, by personal mail, by a personal note, those things have a magnitude of effect on often a double digit if you combine 2 methods like regular mail and email together. Because why? People don't follow up after the first time, and they probably do it by email. So if you send somebody a note, it probably stands out. It's probably special, especially a handwritten note about something that you like about the person, genuinely like, honest, truth. Truth is an amazing thing. It's in my next episode, I'm going to talk about momentum. So tune in for that. And one of the things about momentum is you aren't going to build it when you're dealing with falsehood. People, look right through those falsehoods and don't want to build momentum with you unless you're being truthful. It's where we make impact, that is with sales. And just like any good investment, you need to keep adding value and nurturing your sales funnel. So this is where wisdom of everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. That's the patience idea of James 1:19. Listening during your follow-up helps you to understand what people truly need, not just what you think they need. In Neil Rackman's spin selling, he emphasizes that listening uncovers needs, and those needs are what sell things far more than products and features that you slam down their throat. I had many clients tell me when I was doing well in sales that part of what they liked was I listened and helped them rather than show up and say, hey, you should do this cool statistical technique with me, or this idea I have is what you should do. If you have somebody that is a big purchaser and they're purchasing things all the time, they probably know exactly what they want. And if you just listen, they might help your sales career. When you address what somebody truly needs, you're not just selling, you're solving. That's what trust and influence is. That's when trust and influence are going to grow. Question 4, are you quitting too soon on people who just need a little bit more time? That's the patience concept. You get more sales from existing customers and friends, and you already have customers, you already have fans, you already have supporters, and they want you to grow, I hope. So sell more to them and add value, serve them better. Ed Milet calls this maxing out, and I totally recommend Ed's book, The Power of One More, which might mean one more phone call, one more follow-up, and one more person that you say, I love you to in your personal life. Give that one more little extra effort, show that you care. In general, do what others aren't willing to do for as long as it takes. It's the same with leadership investment. The more you invest in others, the more you get back, not in a transactional way, but in a relationship, trust, and loyalty way. Better a little righteousness than much gain with injustice. Proverbs 6:16-8. Serving others with integrity builds a foundation for lasting impact. So question 5, what's one small way you could add 10 times the value to someone already in your world? Exponential growth. This is something I talk about a lot. When I used to speak at American Marketing Association or other places like that, I felt like it was important to touch on it because where I got a return on my investment in research for customers was helping them to understand how to do exponential growth. And I heard it a lot that, oh, a guy already told me about that. I already knew that. The difference between knowing about it and doing it are really big. And I must admit that I don't always execute as well as I'd like on exponential growth. And it takes looking at your customers and then getting customers to buy more per purchase. So how can you add value? In the research world, you often are selling qualitative research and quantitative research together as a package. So that's one way you can sell more in research, but bundling in general is a way to sell more. So if you're selling a printer, sell it with ink. If you're selling a drink mix, you sell it with a package of something else that is of value that somebody wants. The value meal for McDonald's that's going on right now because people are a little bit uncertain, not going to the sit down restaurants as much. They're able to bring the value menu back again, and people are going to like that. And it increases the value and makes people buy more frequently. So that's the other part of exponential growth. They buy more often. Here's the thing, exponential growth doesn't just happen by chance. It's a result of small, consistent investments in the right areas. Think about my dog's relationship with my wife. At first, my wife wasn't very keen on feeding the dog or letting her on the furniture. Fast forward 7 years, and the dog's daily investments of affection, companionship, and persistency pays off. Now, my wife feeds the dog better food every day. We just had the 4th of July. The dog was on my wife's lap. It's not a small dog. It's a Griffin. It's pretty big hunting dog, and she was on my wife's lap. She cleans and chops up carrots and beans, and recently I was going for the carrots and she said, those are for the dog. So this exponential growth is in action with my dog. Consistency, adding value every single day. The dog increased her influence, and now my wife's experience has grown exponentially too. It's a genuine love fest. All hard work brings a profit, but mere talk leads only to poverty. Proverbs 14:23. Consistent effort, not just words, drives exponential results. That's the hard part. Question 6, what would your life look like if your influence grew exponentially just by adding value every day? Let's think about fundraising with heart. Fundraising isn't begging, it's about enrolling people in a vision. My father was a record breaking fundraiser, and he said when it's simplified, you show up to the people who can make a difference and have something reasonable to say. Recently, I got to shake the hand of a billionaire, and that billionaire mentioned my father in his speech as influencing him for his first major donation. But what he didn't mention was that billionaire was just a recent graduate when my father gave him some business contacts so that he could get some business experience, which was required to go to Harvard Business School. He was a great guy, easy to recommend, and he deserves all the credit for everything he's done. He focused on winning, and he did win in many areas. And so I don't want to diminish what the billionaire did, but it was once a requirement to get some business experience before you went to a school like Harvard for an MBA. And I'm sure it's still preferred today that you have some business experience when you go to a business school. And that's part of why I was asked to teach at business schools. It was because I had a lot of experience with big clients that had real decision making problems. So they hire a researcher like me to help them with the decision. Whether you're selling cookies for school or raising millions for cancer research, remember, people don't just give to needs, they give to dreams. People want to know that they're making a difference. And that was one of the things that this billionaire mentioned in the speech that he gave 2 months ago, I guess. When you listen, what people care about, as we talked about with Neil Rackman's spin selling, it teaches you to uncover their dreams and needs. That's what inspires them to give, not your cause, but the vision that you share with them. Question 7. What dream are you inviting people into? And today in Don Yeager's podcast, I also listened to an individual talk about enrolling people into a dream that's bigger than themselves is part of how you get away from the golden handcuffs, right? If you're a realtor, real estate broker, that business can own you if you don't have a bigger goal and develop your leadership skills so that you can help others to achieve their dreams. And if you help others to achieve their dreams and build your team, then you might have the opportunity to leave the office once in a while. Is it really winning if you're working so many hours as a realtor, you're only making $1 an hour? I hate to say it, but there are a lot of people that are making minimum wage as real estate brokers because they've not developed the team mentality and helping others so that you can live a better life. Kids can often sell better than adults. They're honest, persistent, and unafraid of no. If they have a big enough why. Zig Ziglar told a story about a little boy who wanted a bike so bad he sold lemonade in December. You can see that kid, right? He's so excited about the bike that he doesn't care how cold it is. And he only knows how to do a lemonade stand. So he uses that. But that kind of persistence comes from believing in the dream, not just the product. And make it a game, making it fun. Selling can be fun if you gamify it. One of my favorite sales trainers used to talk about duct taping yourself to the phone so you can go to the bathroom only after you've made your calls. Today, people tend to email only and not make calls, but back in the day, it was a landline, and you really could take the receiver with a wire on it and tape it to your hand. Jim Rohn used to track how many no's he could get in a week because he liked the idea of a no, and a no was a stepping stone to a yes. So he thought it was progress, and people like tallying phone calls in their subconscious. I'm not saying they like it consciously, but in your subconscious, you can see the progress. You're actually making some progress. You're doing something that shows your progress when you just tally the number of calls that you have. And it can make the rejection seem less if you like tally the rejections and that as progress towards your goal. You're actually doing something towards your goal. And I managed call centers and people on projects calling all day long. And back in the day, before there were a lot of fancy gatekeeping electronics and voicemail systems, a person could make 40 calls an hour pretty regularly. And brokers for stock brokerage firms often were doing a couple hundred calls in the morning. You can do a lot more than just one phone call as part of what we're talking about. Influence is leadership. You don't need a title to lead. You don't need a podium to influence. If you care about people and you want to make things better, you're a leader. And if you believe in something better, you're a salesperson of hope. So, question 10, what are you selling the world on right now? Fear or hope? I had a friend that told me about they were having some anxiety and I was trying to help them and going through the things that we as humans need to think about sometimes, how gratitude kills a lot in terms of like when I think about, oh, woe is me, not really. I'm not in a wheelchair. I can move around easily. And there are people in wheelchairs that do and accomplish way more than me. And I've met people that are on the public speaking circuit that make more money than me in real estate and public speaking and everything else, and they have no arms or legs. Now, that is a challenge. Are you fearful or hopeful? And it starts with that hope, right? Hope that he can have a better day. My friend with anxiety was like, his days aren't good and he's a multimillionaire, but he's got golf. His best thing in his golf game isn't going well. Come on. People would love to have his life where he golfs 6 days a week. Create a strong team. Let's take this a little step further. I want to build a team, a group of people who can come together and invest in multifamily real estate. We're talking about a team with different skills: underwriting, capital raising, finance, maintenance, and banking. To make a stellar deal, you need to have the best out of everybody, right? Not just in real estate, because every person's role is essential to the success of the whole team. Leadership investment means giving each person the tools and encouragement that they need to shine in that role. That's where listening, as Rackman teaches, becomes critical. Why truly hearing each team member and their needs and their strengths so that you can align their contributions to the team's vision, creating exponential results. That's where your return on leadership investment really comes to life. When you can empower others and they empower you to get a return. When a team works in harmony, the results can be exponential, as we talked about. Question 11. How can you use your influence to bring out the best in each person on your team? When I worked for Nautilus, they were really growing in their stock and they were on their way up, and I was hired to help with marketing and segmenting markets. I did this in a needs-based way. Think about a treadmill. At one point, Nautilus made the Reebok treadmill, and it was co-branded with Reebok, and it was at a lower price point than, say, a medical grade treadmill where doctors might put wires on you and test your VO2 max and tubes and wires on you. But the reason, the needs why someone would buy a treadmill depends on them, right? One person might want it for weight loss. One person might want it for their medical clinic. One might want it because they had a heart attack. One might want it for a stress reduction. Somebody just may want a running high. Some people might be avoiding walking in bad weather. Some people might be training to walk the trail in Spain or walk around Mont Blanc is another one that was on my bucket list for a while. But anyway, your needs could be vastly different for why you would get something as straightforward as a treadmill. So why real estate is a solid investment. As I mentioned, I'm looking for a multifamily real estate deal, and I would love for you to find me a great deal. And building that cash flow is what it's about, right? So you don't buy real estate that doesn't cash flow. That's basically rule number one. Rule number one is location, location, location. Rule number two is it cash flows. That's what we talk about when we're talking about multifamily or rental properties. But let's say I find something that cash flows and it builds the wealth that I could really make a difference in the world. That's what I want. I want to be doing great things. But when I wrote this podcast, I was on day 6 and I recorded this podcast and my microphone wasn't hooked up. As a friend of mine who's a consultant said, if you have a Shure microphone, it's sure to fail. But looks like we're green light right now. So I hope everything's working well. I put off where I was in terms of my goal setting for my multifamily. I even changed to July as where I started from June just to make myself feel better because I hadn't made the progress that I wanted. Sometimes we do put things off a little bit. Funny how we procrastinate and negotiate with ourselves, right? One of the ways you get deals and work is by bringing in other investors. As the word investor implies, it's an investment that involves risk. So you must think about it in terms of the benefits to the investor. Let's think about this type of sale objectively with no real building involved based on some averages I got from a guy who gave some average numbers. This is a passive investing, which is a component of what I want to do. And this will help me to come up with the financing that makes a multifamily deal work. But it needs to be framed to the needs of the investor. What's in it for the investor? First of all, the investor is passive. They are putting money up and don't have to do any of the work. We're managing the property, renting out the property, and still get the safety of investing as the investor in a tangible asset, not just a novel idea or maybe it'll go venture capital idea. It's building that you can look at, look up the details about. It's that tangible, but you're hands off. You don't have to do the work. If you're a dentist or you invest in a new x-ray machine, you have that tangibility, but you have to manage that, right? It's a real building or a complex of buildings. You might be wondering, why multifamily real estate? Real estate, especially multifamily, offers steady income and long-term growth. There's no massive, dramatic ups and downs like the stock market. Real estate provides stability, and it's one of the best ways to hedge against inflation. Just like leadership investments, real estate is reliable long-term return. You're adding value today for rewards that keep compounding over time. I bought in a market where I ended up upside down in 2008, as did many of us. And it's rough. When you're buying a multifamily deal, the good news is in 10 years, a property won't be underwater, right? The value of the property will increase, rents will go up over 10 years, and you'll be in a better cash flow position in 10 years, even if the building does not allow you to sell it. And many people think you should buy and hold real estate for that very reason. Let's talk about the passive investor and the deal that I want to do. And that kind of a deal that I'm thinking about doing, the standard process is to buy out the investor in 3 to 5 years. And that way they get their money back in 3 to 5 years and they're able to do what they want with that money, really invest in real estate or whatever they want to invest in. And I want you to realize that when I'm talking about these numbers, I'm talking about them from when interest rates are lower, but it's starting to work again today because it's a buyer's market and sellers that I'm interested in understand that investors need a return on their investment. And so the property has to cash flow. And so they're starting to reduce the price on some of the buildings that I would be interested in to make the deal work, even though the interest rates aren't cooperating yet, but prices are being pushed downward a little bit. Financing the deal could happen by the person selling the property too, because they understand that the banks aren't going to maybe provide the interest rate they want. But if you want out of a property and you're going to do an exchange that's advantageous or tax advantageous, you might be willing to, take a small amount of interest on your financing or a smaller amount of interest, which if you were giving a real estate buyer 6%, that might be more than you could get from a CD or another investment if you got cashed out, right? So it can work for both people. And then if you know how to manage a building, if the deal didn't work out and the business plan didn't work out, you may be comfortable taking that building over and having that as a secured asset in the loan. These numbers wouldn't have worked 6 months ago is basically what I'm saying. So when you're listening to this, the numbers could have changed as things in business like interest rates and prices change. So write this down. Often investments are required at $100,000 to get the full benefit and be a full passive investor. When we find the building, we put the deal together so that the investor goes slightly better than a stock market investment or a CD, and they would get 7% per year for 5 years. Sometimes they may get their money back faster if the building appreciates really fast and we can cash them out faster. I'm looking for buildings that have the ability to be improved and appreciate. So there's some appreciation potential that's a little bit of a hedge too. If I buy something that's super fancy and all fixed up as best it can be, that's going to be more expensive, right? It's harder to make it cash flow. And the investor should benefit from that. The investor gets 7% for 5 years, and that's exactly $35,000, right? 7% for 5 years adds to $35K. And then he gets another $19,000 when the building sells in 5 years or sooner. This means that 35,000 plus 19,000 plus the original 100,000 would be 154,000 in 5 years. That's a pretty good return. It could be longer if conditions change, but because we know what the rentals are and what can be underwritten, the deal is based on market conditions and the average numbers. We don't have the specific numbers from a specific building. This is just averages. It doesn't stop there either. The building will appreciate from capital investments like energy efficient windows or appliances, which give value to the renters and might even reduce their electric bills. And this also means rent can go up, which means the building is worth more. But the kicker here is that for a dentist with a W 2 or a high earner with a W 2, these investments may mean that you pay fewer taxes. So if that were not good enough, sometimes investors can be part of the group that actually buys the building after the 5 years. Amazing how many different ways real estate can pay. I've heard about doctors and dentists who pay zero in taxes is pretty amazing. You'd want to structure the deal and have it be structured as an LLC so that if a comet hit the building and you lost everything, you'd only lose your regular $100,000 investment in the deal, and your personal assets would be protected, so your family would be protected. There are other complications like that to think about. But if it's a large enough multifamily building and run like a business, that LLC concept is also worth noting. It is a business. Whereas if you were to buy a duplex, you probably are going to use your personal credit, and they probably want to secure it with your personal home. That's a lot different than $100,000 and then having a return of $154,000 in 5 years. And I don't know anybody who has lost out completely with their investment in real estate, but I do know some investors who do lots of deals that have had situations where they've had to come back to their investors and say, hey, it's going to take 7 years to get us where we want to be exactly on this. But that same person has had also deals where it's 3 years and they are able to reappraise the building because they were able to raise rents because of capital improvements. And not only that, the person that invested 154,000 makes the money on the 154,000, but they also offset their personal tax liabilities because of the cost segregation that's available. So cost segregation is something to look into with ChatGPT and how it works with real estate. I just bring up the LLC concept, and this applies to all kinds of business because you never know what kind of major problems might happen, like fires or floods or things uncovered by insurance. And I see it too often where an entrepreneur goes all in on an idea. They have zero sales. This is very common. They have zero sales and they go all in on something because they're convinced, and their friends and relatives have said, yeah, it sounds like a pretty good idea. And they take that as market research. And it's not necessarily market research if Elmer, who has never done a business in his life, says that sounds like a pretty good idea. And so don't leverage something against your house. Make a business plan out of it and base it on sales and test it out. Can a salesperson actually sell this? You can actually hire a sales representative to test it out for you. Don't just go all in and leverage your house. So question 12, what would it mean for you to create a steady, dependable income without the drama and high risk of ventures? So let's wrap this up and take some action. Here's your simple plan to make an exponential impact. Follow up 5+ times this time with somebody. Serve your current people better. Add value before asking for more. Invite people into your vision, not just your product. Question 13, what's the first step you're taking today to grow your influence and build your team? Let me wrap up with a final story. A few years ago, I took a class from Jerry Hocutt. I think this is super interesting. He was a master salesperson for McCaw Communications, #1 salesperson for them. If you remember that group back when doctors wore pagers in Washington State, he was the top guy, and I think he was like West Coast representative. I don't know what his territory was exactly, but he was the #1 salesperson for a major company that totally influenced the wireless world. His methods transformed my sales approach. And one thing he taught me is how to deal with rejection, embrace it, even make it a goal. Just like Viktor Frankl's paradoxical intention. Look up his paradoxical intention, but Jerry taught me that, and to make rejection a stepping stone, not a stumbling block. It's a mindset shift that works not just in sales, but in life. When you realize that rejection is a stepping stone, you might notice that the people who are doing big things often receive some rejection. Just like the top salespeople politicians, and the top fundraisers, and even a little kid in Texas selling lemonade in December. Thank you for tuning in to this and other leadership podcasts so you can grow your leadership skills and get a return on your efforts in all those places that you wanted to have influence. Bless your week.